So let us now go back to the first days of September 1939, when the war had just begun. The Polish pilots were taking their P-11Cs up into the air to fight against the German planes. The P-11C had been developed in 1931 and 1932, and at that point it was probably the most advanced fighter in the world. But powered flight had only begun 28 years before at Kitty Hawk in the United States, and developments of flying machines were occurring at tremendous speed, so that by 1936 and 1937, the Germans, who were building their Luftwaffe at great speed, had developed planes that were faster than planes that had been developed in 1931 and 1932. And by 1939, the Germans had bombers that could fly faster than Polish fighters. Now, the critical thing in air combat, well, there are actually two critical things. One is airspeed, and the other is maneuverability, because, in fact, the slower the plane, the more maneuverable it is. But the faster the plane, the quicker it can get out of trouble. And the problem with the differential of speed is that it's relative to the two speeds at which the separate planes are flying. So if you're in a plane that is flying at 210 miles an hour, which is obviously very quick if it's traveled over the ground, in the air it's 210 miles an hour. If it's chasing a plane that is flying at 240 miles an hour, the appearance will be that the faster plane will move away from the slower plane at a speed of 30 miles an hour. So if, for example, you were to get into your car and drive along the road at 30 miles an hour, that is the speed at which it feels, or at which it is, that the German plane is flying away from the Polish plane. And there was only one way to counter this, and that was to dive at the enemy planes, because obviously in a dive a plane is flying faster than it flies horizontally. So the Polish planes could not attack the German planes from below. They had to attack from above, and that attack had to be timed in such a way that the German plane was kind of like there as the Polish plane came in. So the opportunities to attack were far more limited. If the two planes were flying on the level, the German plane would be moving away from the Polish plane. So the way to attack was spot the German plane and be at an altitude above it and dive at it, and then shoot using your maneuverable plane to actually come back up, and you could deliver a full blast from your machine gun at the German plane. This was the way that a victory could be achieved. Otherwise, it was simply a matter of a frustrating chase of an enemy who was able to fly faster than you were. Now, The Polish system was to fly in a formation of two, where you had the senior pilot and his wingman flying more or less alongside him. The pilot's duty was to initiate the attack, and the wingman was to give cover, and then when the pilot had fired, the wingman would move in to finish the job if it had to be finished, because the plane had not been downed. And we come to the 4th of September when Corporal Zaniewski, flying as wingman, is involved in an attack on a German Dornier that is well below them. The two Polish planes go into the attack. The lieutenant fires into the side of the Dornier, sets it on fire, slows it down, but even then, that downward momentum has taken the lieutenant away from the Dornier, and the wingman comes in to finish the job. The German plane is crippled and starting to smoke. The crew on the Dornier has its pilot keeping the plane going whilst the rest of the crew bail out, desperately trying to escape from the burning plane. And as they open the door that's going to allow them to parachute out of the plane, they're faced with the wingman and his P-11C, who's moved to within 30 yards of the German plane before he begins to fire. What the wingman sees, having initiated the firing by pressing the button, the trigger that will fire his guns, is he sees a door come open and he sees the faces of two men 30 yards away. They are young German lads. They've just dropped a bunch of bombs on Poland. They felt victorious. Suddenly there was the surprise, the very unpleasant surprise, of an attack from a Polish plane, and as they desperately try to escape, they're confronted with a plane almost directly in front of them. Its cannons are blazing, and in fact, as they stand there in surprise and horror, they are mown down by the machine gun fire, and they're killed. The pilot has simply had a tremendous shock because the plane has changed from an inanimate enemy object that must be destroyed to coming face to face with two people who have suddenly humanized the plane, and his fire has shredded them into pieces, and he is shocked as the German plane falls to the ground.